Willie Thompson's hands moved with the precision of a master craftsman as he slid the straight razor along Bumpy Johnson's neck. 4 decades of cutting hair in Harlem had made him more than just a barber. He was a vault of the neighborhood's deepest secrets. But today, one of those secrets carried weight heavy enough to get a man killed. 3 strangers had just stepped through the front door. Strangers Willie had never seen before. Strangers dressed in long coats that didn't belong in spring. And Willie understood instantly, like every man in Harlem would, what those coats concealed. The first man walked straight over and bolted the front door. The second one pulled the blinds tight. The third positioned himself directly behind Bumpy, hand buried inside his coat, fingers coiled around something cold and permanent. Bumpy sat still, eyes closed, hot towel covering his face. A sitting target, helpless. The man behind him brought out the pistol, pressed it to Bumpy's skull, and cocked it back. "Don't move, Willie," the voice whispered. "This ain't your business. Just keep cutting." The room felt frozen. 3 guns, 1 man. Bumpy had no weapon, no way out. But then Bumpy spoke, calmly, as if it were just another Thursday. He said 3 words, "Closer, Willie." What went down in the following 47 seconds would stitch itself into Harlem's fabric forever. 3 killers entered that shop. But when the smoke drifted clear and the sirens faded into the distance, only 1 man emerged on his feet, and it wasn't anyone carrying heat. What nobody realized, what Harlem's corners still whisper about today, is Bumpy Johnson saw this coming long before those 3 even picked out their outfits. To truly grasp what happened inside Willie Thompson's barbershop that day, you've got to understand who Bumpy Johnson was in 1957 and why powerful men would stop at nothing to erase him. By the time the spring of 1957 arrived, Bumpy Johnson had become something the Italian mob couldn't predict, couldn't buy, and couldn't kill, a black kingpin they couldn't control. For over 20 years, he ran Harlem's numbers game. And it wasn't just gambling, it was survival. Every morning, from 110th to 155th Street, folks would drop nickels and dimes on 3-digit combos that might just change their luck. Those small bets? They added up. By 57, Harlem's numbers operation was pulling in more than $20 million a year, and that pot made the mob restless. Because while the money was tempting, it wasn't what made Bumpy truly dangerous. What made him untouchable was love, the kind you can't buy with cash or threaten with a gun. When city officials tried shutting down black-owned shops along 125th, Bumpy made calls. The harassment stopped. When landlords slipped eviction notices under doors in the dead of winter, Bumpy covered the rent. When men came home from prison with nowhere to go and nobody offering a future, Bumpy didn't just hand them cash. He walked them into restaurants, barbershops, laundromats, places he'd kept open himself, and vouched for them. "He served his time," Bumpy would say. "Now let the man earn his keep." The Italian mob ran things with bone-chilling fear. But Bumpy built something stronger, respect. And real respect? That doesn't come from fists or fear. It grows from loyalty, protection, and presence. By that year, the Genovese family had grown tired of seeing their influence stop at the 110th block. Dito Genovese himself had taken the top spot after Lucky Luciano's departure, and patience wasn't something he practiced. Harlem looked like easy money to him, $20 million annually, guarded by 1 man. They had tried playing rough before. The first time, 4 enforcers were sent to shake down one of Bumpy's runners. All 4 ended up getting stitched together at St. Luke's that night. The second time, they tried slipping bribe money to a Harlem councilman, trying to block Bumpy's operations through city permits. 3 days later, that same councilman came to his desk to find photographs waiting, ones that nearly set his marriage ablaze. By noon, the permits were signed. What they didn't get was that Bumpy wasn't just a street boss. He was playing chess while they were fumbling with checkers. So the Genovese family switched tactics again. This time, they went outside the city. They hired ghosts, outsiders, men whose faces no one in Harlem could recognize. Philly soldiers, 3 brothers, Sal, Marco, and Dominic Carbone. Petty hitters with big dreams and nothing to lose. Just the kind of guys who do anything for a quick payday. The payout, 30,000 cash, split 3 ways, plus a chunk of claimed Brooklyn turf once the target was gone. The instructions were simple. Kill Bumpy Johnson. How and where didn't matter. Just finish the job by the end of the week. The Carbone boys gave themselves 3 days. They studied Bumpy's habits, his patterns. He had breakfast at the same counter every morning, ran business at Small's Paradise after sundown. But what made them grin was this. Every Thursday afternoon, like clockwork, Bumpy headed to Willie Thompson's Barbershop on 182nd Street. Same seat, same hour. 2 hours of cuts, conversation, and quiet. For those 2 hours, every Thursday, Bumpy Johnson barely moved. He was stationary, predictable, exposed. At least, that's what they believed. But what they never imagined, what even Vito Genovese failed to realize, was that Bumpy Johnson had lasted 25 years, not by trusting anyone completely, but by knowing everyone absolutely. March 11th, 1957, Philadelphia. The deal went down in the back room of a quiet social club on South 9th Street. Vito didn't show his face. He never got his hands dirty. His underboss, Tony Salerno, made sure of that. Sal Carbone, the eldest at 34, was their mouthpiece. 3 men, 3 days. 1 shot, Salerno explained, unveiling a photo and sliding it across the table. Ellsworth Johnson. Harlem calls him Bumpy. Why Bumpy? Marco asked. Head injury from when he was a kid. Scar shaped like a knot. Salerno leaned closer. But don't let the name make you soft. North of 96, that man owns everything. Cops, judges, janitors. They all owe him something. So how are we supposed to get close? Dominic, the youngest at 26, elbowed in. Salerno gave a slow, cold smile. That's what makes you special. No one knows your faces. You don't live here. You don't talk to locals. You're shadows. Hate your mark. Melt back to Philly. Clean. Quiet. He slid a thick envelope forward. $15,000 in blues. Half now. Rest comes when I see his body in the paper, Salerno said sternly. Don't make me come looking. Sal opened it, flipped through the stack. His brothers watched, silent. We've done hits before, Sal said carefully. But this one feels different. And it should, Salerno snapped. Better men have failed. They knew the turf and the players. They vanished, or left missing parts of their hands. You're not better. You're just strangers. That's your only edge. Don't waste it. Before we get deeper into this story, tell me this. If you were in Bumpy Johnson's shoes, knowing 3 armed men were coming for you, would you set a trap or disappear? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm curious how y'all would play it. And hey, if you're locked in like we are, hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe for more legendary Harlem tales that only get wilder from here. The Carbone brothers hit the road at dawn. They reached New York by lunchtime, checked into a crumbling flop house on the Lower East Side far enough from Harlem to stay invisible. Over the next 3 days, they tracked everything. They watched from street corners, took grainy photos through newspaper holes, memorized routines. By Wednesday night, they had a plan, down to the minute. Sal spread a sketched layout across their motel bed. The barbershop, he said, pointing. Thursday afternoon, he's always there. 2 straight hours, 1 chair, 1 entrance in the front, 1 out back. We lock the front, we post on the back. He's pinned. 3 guns, 1 man. Marco tapped the part labeled rear alley. Anybody inside? Few customers. The barber. But he's not going to get involved, Sal answered. He just wants to keep breathing. He keeps cutting. He walks out. Dominic raised an eyebrow. And if he doesn't? Sal shrugged. Then that razor of his won't be the sharpest thing in the room. Marco pulled the slide of his Colt 45, checking the chamber. I've never killed someone this famous, he muttered. By Thursday night, Sal said coldly, he won't be famous anymore. Just a memory. What none of them considered, what no one could have guessed, was that by that very Wednesday evening, their presence was already common knowledge in Harlem. 3 separate warnings had reached Bumpy Johnson. 3 different messengers. The cabbie who picked them up at Penn Station noticed their accents. Italian. The way they asked about Harlem. about barbershops. Something didn't sit right. Then there was the hotel clerk who handed them their keys. He tipped off Bumpy's man before the beds were even used. And finally, the third whisper came from a newspaper vendor at 132nd. He saw them watching, taking notes. They didn't look like press. They looked like trouble. By Wednesday night, Bumpy Johnson had them tagged, followed, and clocked. And he hadn't lifted a single finger. That's how he'd lasted. Bumpy didn't survive against mobs and crooked cops by shooting first. He knew better than most that the real weapon, the one that never needed to be reloaded, was intelligence. And while the Carbone brothers were drawing blueprints and role-playing their ambush, Bumpy was upstairs at Small's Paradise, sipping coffee, listening to Jerome Patterson retell every mile of the cab ride. 3 white boys, Jerome said, leaning in low. Definitely not local, talked Philly the whole time. All 3 asking about barbershops. One of them had a photo he tried to hide, but I saw it. Bumpy raised an eyebrow. A photo of me? Jerome nodded, clear as daylight. Bumpy reached into his coat, peeled off 5 crisp 10s, handed them over. You didn't see them, and you didn't drive them. You were off duty. Jerome nodded without a word and left the room. Bumpy sat still, letting silence pool around him. He could have had them buried that night. One message, 3 men floating in the East River. No noise, no response from the Genovese family. But Bumpy wasn't thinking about silencing 3 nobodies. He wanted to end the conversation for good. No more messages sent. This wasn't about protecting himself anymore. It was about slamming the door shut on the idea that anyone could even try. He went to Willie's shop the very next morning. Not for a cut, just to talk. Willie had been cutting hair in Harlem since 1917. The man was iron, had seen wars, gang wars, gentrification, depression, and riots. He'd served in the First World War. 36th 4th Infantry Buffalo Soldiers, 62 years old with steel in his knuckles and razors sharper than rumors. As Bumpy settled into the leather chair, he lowered his voice. There's gonna be heat tomorrow, he said. 3 men. They're coming for me. Willie didn't flinch, just kept sweeping hair into a pan. Street heat or city heat? Street, Italian money, muscle from Philly. Willie stopped sweeping for a second and looked at Bumpy through the mirror. So what do you need from me? Trust, Bumpy replied. When they come in, just keep cutting. Pretend it's any other day. But when I say the word closer, that's your cue. Hit the ground. No questions. Willie studied Bumpy's eyes for a long moment, then quietly nodded. Mr. Praca. Johnson, I've been cutting your hair for over 15 years. You've never given me one reason to second-guess you. Tomorrow ain't gonna be the first. That night, Bumpy made moves. 2 of his men posted across the street from the barbershop, not to step in unless needed, but to bear witness. One more man took up position in the apartment above. The ace in the deck, though, the piece no one suspected, was what Bumpy placed under the barber chair itself, a small .32 caliber revolver taped tightly to the frame beneath the seat. 2 strips of electrical tape held it in place. He wasn't walking into an ambush. He was setting it. Thursday morning came like any other. Bumpy had his usual breakfast, took his regular walk past 143rd, said hello to shopkeepers who owed him rent and respect. At exactly 2:30 p.m., he entered Willie's shop like he had for a decade and a half. No difference in tone, no change in posture. Willie draped the white cloth over Bumpy's shoulders, swirled warm shaving cream on his chin, and began that familiar, careful scrape of metal against skin. 12 minutes later, at 2:42 p.m., the barbershop door chimed open. 3 men entered, their coats too thick for the season, their eyes too still. One turned and locked the front door. The shop quieted like someone had hit mute. A schoolteacher and a postal worker holding magazines froze in their seats. One brother posted near the door. Another drifted toward the back. The youngest, Dominic, stepped directly behind the chair. Willie's blade paused for just a breath when he saw him. His eyes caught Bumpy's in the reflection. There was no fear, no panic, just a small, silent nod. Keep going. Dominic reached inside his coat, drew out the .45 in one smooth pull. He pressed the muzzle hard against Bumpy's skull and leaned in. "Don't move, Willie," he whispered. "Just keep doing your job. This ain't got nothing to do with you." The shop sat in utter stillness. The wall clock ticked too loud. The schoolteacher's hand trembled as he tried to steady it. The postal worker had lowered his face, lips moving silently like he was praying. Sal stepped forward, slow and cold. "Mr. Johnson," he said, "you know why we're here?" Bumpy didn't open his eyes, didn't speak right away, just rested, hot towel soft on his cheek. Then, calmly, "I've been expecting you since Monday." Sal blinked. "What?" "The cab from Penn Station, the hotel clerk on Delancey, the newspaper vendor outside 132nd. Bumpy's voice didn't rise above conversational. "You really thought I wouldn't know? You really thought you could creep through my home without me seeing?" Dominic shoved the pistol tighter into his scalp. "Yeah, well, knowing doesn't change a thing. You're still gonna die." Bumpy opened his eyes slowly, looked into the mirror, and right into Dominic's reflection. "Son," he said smoothly, "I've had bigger threats than you point guns at me. Every one of them is pushing dirt now. You want to join them? Then go ahead. Squeeze that trigger." For a few long seconds, nobody drew a breath. The tension hung so thick, it was like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Then Bumpy said it again, those same calm, unfazed, fatal words. "Closer, Willie." Before the syllables even stopped echoing in the silent room, Willie dropped like a lead weight. The towel slipped from Bumpy's face, and in one movement so quick it blurred, Bumpy reached under the chair, ripped the .32 from its tape, and fired without hesitation. The first shot struck Dominic dead center in the chest. He staggered backwards, dropping the pistol, hands clutching at red soaking through his shirt. Marco, standing at the back door, pulled his weapon, but Bumpy spun in the barber chair, arm extended, and let off a second round. The bullet caught Marco in the shoulder, slamming him through the back door and into the alley with a crash. Sal, still frozen up front, finally responded, fumbling for his gun. But before he even raised it, the front window of the barbershop exploded inward with a shattering blast of glass. Two figures, Bumpy's men from across the street, stepped forward into the sunlight with sawed-off shotguns aimed dead center. 4 eyes, 4 barrels. Sal's weapon hit the floor. His hands went up high like surrender was an instinct. Just like that, it was over. From the first twitch of Bumpy's fingers to the last glass shard falling, 47 seconds had passed. Bumpy stood tall, calm, composed. He peeled off the barber's cape like it was a suit jacket, stepped out of the chair, and walked straight over to Sal. The man was trembling, his knees barely supporting his weight. Bumpy didn't raise his voice. He leaned in close so that his words couldn't be mistaken for anything but truth. "I could have had you dead on Monday," he said, voice like glass on stone. "I could have had your bodies dumped quiet, but I let you live. I let you walk through that door, so you'd see this, so you'd understand." He stepped even closer, close enough that the scent of shaving cream between them filled the air. "Now you go back to Philadelphia. You go tell Vito Genovese what happened here. You tell him I knew before his boys ever boarded that train. You tell him I let them reach me because I was never the one boxed in." Bumpy's expression never changed. His voice dropped again, low as a final drumbeat. "You tell him Harlem bleeds for no one." Sal was crying now, full on. The tears streamed like a child who woke from a nightmare. And Sal, Bumpy said his name like punctuation, like a warning. "If anyone from the Genovese family steps foot in my neighborhood again, there'll be no warning, no message, no mercy, just bodies. We clear?" Sal couldn't even get the words out. He just nodded, eyes wide, lips trembling. "Now walk," Bumpy said. "Don't run. Walking shows respect. Running shows guilt. Right now, the only thing keeping you breathing is respect. Don't lose it." Sal turned, legs shaking, and walked through the broken door like a man who just escaped a ghost. Marco Carbone bled out before the ambulance could even reach him. Dominic died right there on the checkered tile floor, next to the waiting chairs. Sal Carbone rode the train back to Philadelphia that very night and swore never to return to New York again. Behind him, Willie Thompson swept the shattered glass into a pan, wiped the leather seat clean, and opened the shop like it was any other Friday. Business as usual. But on the streets, that story caught fire like gasoline on concrete. By nightfall, every hustler, bookmaker, and ear to the concrete whisper chaser from Baltimore to Boston had heard the legend. 3 gunmen came to kill Bumpy Johnson. Only the barber walked out, and he cleaned the mess himself. The Genovese family convened an urgent sit-down the next week. Nobody raised their voice. The silence spoke loudest. Vito Genovese stayed quiet through the whole discussion. And when he finally said something, his voice didn't carry the weight of authority. It carried tired recognition. "This man," he said, eyes staring off like he was seeing the outcome all over again. He knew. He knew before our people left Philly. He knew where they slept, knew how they moved, knew every damn breath they took. And he still let them walk into that shop. He paused. The entire room waited. "So tell me," Genovese asked with bitter finality, "what are we supposed to do with a man like that?" Across the table, Tony Salerno didn't say a word. Vito answered his own question. "We leave Harlem alone. There's money in the city from Yonkers to Coney Island, the Bronx, Queens, the docks. But Harlem?" He exhaled slowly. "Harlem belongs to Bumpy Johnson. It always has. Only twice in a decade had the Italian mob ever backed off a territory without negotiation, without a single demand. This was one of them. As for Sal Carbone, he returned to Philadelphia a shell of who he was. He abandoned the game entirely, never placed another bet, never asked about turf or contracts again. Instead, he opened a small hardware store in South Jersey, quiet and tucked away. He managed it for 3 decades without ever once setting foot back in New York. And whenever the name Bumpy Johnson was mentioned, no matter the room or the reason, Sal would silently excuse himself. No words. Just the echo of fear that never left. Willie Thompson kept cutting hair until 1972, week after week. And every Thursday, without fail, Bumpy would take that same chair, lean back with the same relaxed posture, and talk about life like it was just another Thursday. Above Willie's mirror, written in small faded letters that barely caught the eye, were 5 words. Most customers never noticed. But for those who did, those quiet words spoke volumes. Harlem bleeds for no one, and that barbershop story, it never was just about bloodshed. It was about something wider, deeper. It was about clarity. Bumpy Johnson had learned what most men never realize across an entire lifetime. True power doesn't come from fear. It comes from perception. Not what you do to your enemies, but what they believe you could do. That's the difference. Power lives in reputation, in presence, in being 3 steps ahead before anyone else picks up a piece. Because the Carbone brothers walked in thinking they had control. They had numbers. They had firepower. They had the drop. But Bumpy? Bumpy had something else, something no weapon in the world could match. He had the nerve to let them come, to show them, even in the heart of what looked like a trap, who really owned the board. If that story lit something in you, remember, this was only one chapter in Bumpy's legacy. There's more. Stories of rooms filled with enemies where he walked in alone. Stories of deals made without words and wars won with whispers. You felt the tension when Willie paused his blade. You understood why Bumpy said, "Closer." Now here's the question only you can answer. If you were Bumpy, would you have let Sal live? Would your message be a whisper or a body? Next time, we're telling the tale of how an unarmed Bumpy Johnson faced down Lucky Luciano himself and walked away with control over all of Harlem. You don't want to miss that one. Because remember this, in Harlem, there's one rule that's carved into the concrete. Respect isn't given, it's earned. What would you have done if you were in that barber chair waited, or fired first? Let me know in the comments. I read every one of them, and you'd be surprised how many different takes there are on power and respect. If this story pulled you in, tap that like button and hit subscribe so you never miss the next chapter in Bumpy Johnson's legend. Harlem's full of stories like this, and trust me, the ones coming next, they'll leave you speechless.